Chudal, or better known as witch in Hindi. To the Indian culture, a Chudal is a supernatural evil entity that is very dangerous. In India, a Chudal is known by many different names throughout many different regions, and over thousands of people have claimed to have met these Chudals. It is believed by some that when a woman dies in a very painful and horrible way, her spirit becomes a Chudal, whereas others believe that Chudals are purely demonic entities that live in secluded areas like mountains and forests, and only come out during the night to lure their human prey. Once captured, the Chudal will either kill their victims, or worse, imprison them so they can reproduce with them. But what they do with the offspring is unknown. Many people speculate that they use the offspring for sacrificial rituals. In this Chudal series, I will bring you one real story every week, starting with the following story, which comes from the Himachal Pradesh. Himachal Pradesh is an Indian state, large in size but with a low population, leaving most of the land unoccupied. Being a region surrounded by mountains and jungles, it's a home ground for paranormal activities. Our story goes as follows. Many years ago, there was a man who used to live in one of these mountain villages in the Himachal state. He was married and lived at home with his wife and parents, and held a good job in the city. Being in the mountain regions, traveling to and from the city was difficult. Buses were non-existent in the region, leaving the man only one option for travel, and that was to walk home every day. It's because of this job in the city, traveling back and forth from the village would require him to come home late at night, every night. And so, one night, as usual, while he was coming back from work, he lost track of time. So much so that the hour struck midnight, and the night would be accompanied by a light rain. While he was walking, he heard a faint cry in the distance, which got him worried. He went to find the source of the noise, only to find a woman sitting under a tree, crying. The woman was dressed in an Indian wedding gown and decorated with an assortment of jewelry. He slowly approached the woman and asked her what was wrong and why she was crying. She didn't reply. The woman just kept on weeping, so the man asked her again. He repeated his question, but this time the girl stood up and started walking away. Something wasn't right, and he had thought that the woman might be in danger or needed his help, and so he decided to follow her, all the while continuously calling out to her, but she wouldn't stop. After walking around for a while, the woman just disappeared. Confused and still believing that the woman was in danger, the man continued to look around for her, but after a while of searching, to no avail, the woman was gone, and so the man was left with no choice but to resume his commute back home. He had only taken a few steps before he heard a woman calling out his name. He was intrigued, thinking that it might be the same woman, but how could she have known his name? He thought maybe someone would be playing a prank on him, and thinking nothing more, he started going in the direction of the woman's call. After walking a few minutes, he found himself standing at the entrance of a cave, and in front of the cave stood the same woman. They locked eyes, and as soon as she saw him, she turned and started walking inside the cave. And of course, he followed her into the mouth of the cave. He was only a few steps into the cave when he saw the same woman, hunched over, strangely moving. It was hard to see in the darkness, but the man was able to make out that the woman's appearance was changing. The woman was revealing her true identity. She was a Chudal. The woman's face twisted and turned horrifically. Her feet bent backwards. Her hair grew so long that it brushed the floor. Seeing that twisted being, the man turned in horror and tried to run, but to no success. He couldn't move. He was locked in her trap. His feet were glued to the cave floor. The Chudal slowly moved towards the man. He closed his eyes and tried to fight back, but it was no use. The Chudal had won. She would have her way with him each and every night until he helped her produce what she was after all along. She wanted a baby. And so the man was forced to sleep with the Chudal every night. And finally, after several years of repeating the same horrifying night over and over again, the Chudal finally gave birth to 2 children. But our story doesn't end here. It was during the day that the man would live trapped in the cave with the 2 children and the Chudal, while at night she would leave them and hunt for more prey. Fearing that the man would try to run away, every night before leaving the cave, she would put something in his eyes, which would make him completely blind. But when the morning struck, she would return to the cave and give the man his sight back. It wasn't until one night that the man had a plan. Like every other night before leaving the cave, she placed the drops into his eyes and silently left for her hunt. The children were still present in the cave, and so after she left for the night, the man called out to the child. He asked for them to bring him the drops that their mother would put in his eyes in the morning. They were innocent and didn't think anything of their father's request, so they did what their father had asked and gave him the potion. He immediately put the drops into his eyes and got his vision back. As soon as his sight returned, he knew that he didn't have much time and started to run. He ran away from the cave, leaving the children. That night, he ran for hours and wouldn't stop running until he reached his home. When he got back to his house, the people of the village couldn't recognize him. He had been gone for so long, they had thought him dead. He told the story to all the people in the village about the crying woman, about being captured, being tortured, and forced to make children with the Chudal. The village listened to his story, each and every detail, until the sun came up the next morning. It was during this same morning that the Chudal had returned from her hunt. She discovered that the man had managed to escape her cave. Enraged, she tracked him down to his village and called his name from outside the boundaries of the village, calling, "Where are you? Why have you left your children alone? They miss you. Come back to your home." Every night, she would come to his village and call his name. Everyone in the village heard her voice, but nobody could see her. She would not enter the village, but only call for him from the outside boundaries. He lost 10 years of his life in that cave with the Chudal, and now that he was home, safe in his village, he knew he would never go back. He would never leave his village on his own again. Time passed, and as the man eventually died at the ripe age of 90, so did the calling from the Chudal. Both faded away into history. But even until this day, this story remains a very famous story in the area that is still shared by everyone who knows it. The village would later be renamed after the man, La Anjita. Nobody knows who that woman was or where she came from, but everyone is sure of one thing: the woman was a Chudal. Well, friends, how'd you like today's story? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for this channel to listen each and every weekday for more real horror stories. We got a ton of amazing real horror stories, and we're dying to share them with you. So until then, stay out of the dark and stay tuned for our next video.